when my CEO slid a folder across her desk and told me to open it. I had no idea I was about to look at a condensed version of my entire life. My name is Jake Calloway. I'm 29 years old and I write brand copy for a living, a job that sounds more creative and important than it usually feels. Most days I sit at a third-floor desk in Chicago at Harrov Creative Group, stringing together sentences meant to persuade people to want things they never plan to buy. I've been doing it for nearly 2 years now. I'm decent at it. Not exceptional, not terrible, just stationary. Before I explain what was inside that folder, you need to understand where I was standing the morning it appeared in front of me. Without that piece, nothing else that follows will fully make sense. Was 3 months behind on rent. My landlord had stopped returning my calls altogether. My bank account hadn't climbed above 2 digits in weeks. And then there was the debt, $53,000, that began the day my father got sick and kept growing long after he was gone. That number lived in my head like a constant background noise. It was the first thing I registered every morning before I was even fully awake. My dad spent the last 2 years of his life battling an illness that slowly stripped everything from our family: savings, stability, any sense of future we thought we had. My mom still lives in the same small house outside Columbus where I grew up. She's 61 now, working part-time at a grocery store. She never complains, not once. Somehow that makes the weight of it heavier, not lighter. I sent her money whenever I could, whatever I could scrape together, to cover what insurance refused to pay. The loans I took out to keep doing that were now the very thing pulling me under. I tried everything I could think of. Freelance work late into the night. Selling off equipment I couldn't afford to replace. Reaching out to people from college I hadn't spoken to in years, hoping someone might have an opportunity or a lead. Every door I knocked on either stayed closed or opened just long enough to say sorry before shutting again. By the time that Monday morning arrived, I was running almost entirely on momentum and caffeine. I hadn't slept properly in days. The kind of sleep where your mind actually lets go, where you wake up not already tired. Instead, I drifted in and out of shallow, anxious half-dreams filled with numbers, deadlines, and unfinished sentences. Work had become a strange blur. I still showed up, still delivered copy on time, still nodded through meetings as if everything was stable and under control. But inside, something had begun to thin out, like a rope fraying fiber by fiber. I could feel it happening and had no idea how to stop it. That morning, the office looked exactly the same as it always did. Glass walls, soft grey carpet, the low mechanical hum of printers waking up for the day. People moved through the space carrying coffee cups and conversations about weekend plans. Normal life, continuing at full speed, completely unaware that mine was quietly sliding off its axis. I remember staring at my screen, reading the same headline draft over and over without absorbing a word. My inbox kept filling, notifications blinked, somewhere nearby someone laughed, and all I could think was a single, steady sentence. I can't keep doing this much longer. That was the exact state I was in when my calendar reminder appeared. Executive reviews weren't unusual at Harrov. They happened often enough that no one panicked when they appeared on a calendar. Usually they meant campaign alignment, tone adjustments, or a gentle reminder that clients preferred safer language than whatever you tried to sneak past them. Still, Harper Lane didn't meet with copywriters individually. Not at my level, not without a department head present. She was 3 layers above me in the organizational chart and existed mostly as a distant, composed presence glimpsed through glass walls or during quarterly presentations. So when 9:58 rolled around and I found myself standing outside her office alone, something inside me tightened. Her assistant gave a small, professional smile and gestured me in without a word. The door closed softly behind me with the kind of quiet finality that makes a room feel suddenly smaller. Harper sat behind a wide, immaculate desk, posture straight, expression unreadable. No laptop open, no documents spread out, just a single folder resting at the center of the surface, aligned with geometric precision. She looked at me for a moment, not cold, not warm, assessing. Then she placed her hand on the folder and slid it across the desk toward me. "Jake," she said, calm and even, "I'd like you to take a look at something." The folder was heavier than I expected. Not physically, just in the way certain objects seem to carry intention. It was thick, cream-colored cardstock, the company logo embossed in the lower corner. My name was printed on a tab along the edge in clean black type, Callawayj. I remember noticing that detail first, the formality of it, the way my identity had been reduced to a labeled category. I glanced up once instinctively, as if checking whether this was some kind of mistake. Harper gave the smallest nod, "Go ahead." So I opened it. The first page wasn't a memo or a performance review, it was a profile. My profile. A full-page document with my photograph in the corner, the same headshot from my employee badge, slightly desaturated, cropped tighter. Beneath it, structured sections in corporate formatting. Name: Jake Calloway. Age: 29. Role: brand copywriter. Tenure: 1 year 11 months. Then the lines that made my stomach drop. Financial stress indicators: severe. Debt load: high. Retention risk: elevated. External vulnerability score: 87%. I didn't understand what I was looking at yet. Not logically, but my body understood before my brain did, the way it sometimes does when something crosses an invisible boundary you didn't know existed. I felt heat rise up the back of my neck. Slowly, I turned the page. The next page was worse. It wasn't summary anymore, it was detail. A table ran down the center, clean and analytical, like something pulled from a financial audit. Dates, institutions, balances, payment histories, loan origins, credit utilization percentages calculated to 2 decimal places. I recognized everything. The private student loan I'd refinanced twice. The medical credit line opened the year my father's treatment escalated. The emergency card I'd maxed out the month after the funeral when my mother's furnace died in February. Even the short-term installment plan from a pharmacy chain, $312 for medication insurance, wouldn't fully cover. All of it was there. Not approximated, not inferred. Known. My mouth went dry. I flipped another page faster now, a rising pressure building in my chest. Spending pattern analysis. Behavioral stress markers. Productivity correlation under financial strain. Charts mapped my work output against debt growth over time. A downward slope traced the last 8 months with brutal clarity, each 0.25% drop in performance aligned with another financial hit in my life. I stopped on a highlighted section. Predictive compliance modeling. And beneath it, subject demonstrates high likelihood of accepting extraordinary employment conditions under targeted financial relief scenarios. I didn't realize I'd stopped breathing until my lungs forced air back in. Slowly, I lifted my eyes from the page. Harper was watching me with the composed patience of someone who had seen this exact moment many times before. "Before you ask," she said quietly, "yes, the data is accurate." She paused just long enough for that to settle. "And yes," she added, "we obtained it legally." The room felt very quiet. Not the ordinary office quiet filled with HVAC hum and distant keyboards. This was denser, sealed, the kind of silence that forms when something irreversible has just entered the space. I closed the folder, though my hand stayed resting on it, as if contact mattered, as if removing my palm might somehow make everything inside it more real. "What is this?" I asked. My voice sounded controlled, professional, the same tone I used in client calls when budgets collapsed or timelines broke. It was the only shield I had left. Harper folded her hands on the desk. "This," she said, "is an assessment." She let the word sit there a moment, then continued. Harrove has spent the last 6 years developing a strategic initiative built around workforce stability, retention, performance continuity, cognitive load management. We've learned that financial distress is the single most reliable predictor of employee volatility. I said nothing. People under sustained financial pressure, she went on, make different decisions. They change jobs abruptly. They burn out faster, they disengage, or they accept opportunities they otherwise wouldn't consider. Her gaze held mine, not predatory, not sympathetic, clinical. "You are currently in a statistically extreme band of that spectrum, Jake." The statement landed with the force of something already known. She turned the folder back toward herself and opened it to the final section. A single page, minimal text, large margins, contract formatting. Then she rotated it again so it faced me. "At Harrove," she said, "we offer a program designed specifically for employees in your position." A brief pause. Total financial resolution, she said evenly. All personal debt eliminated immediately. My pulse hit hard once in my throat. In exchange, she finished, for a defined period of exclusive professional commitment under expanded role parameters. The words hung between us. I looked down at the page. At the number printed in bold near the bottom. $53,218.47, liability acquisition value. Exactly my debt. To the cent. I felt something shift inside me then, not relief, not hope, something more dangerous. Possibility. I didn't touch the page. My eyes stayed on the number as if movement might cause it to change. $53,218.47. A figure I had carried for years as something abstract and crushing had suddenly become precise. Finite, contained inside margins and typography. Buyable. I became aware of my heartbeat again, heavy, deliberate, as though my body had shifted into some older survival rhythm. Fight, run, freeze, except none of those fit this situation. There was no visible threat, no raised voices, no pressure. Just an offer. What does expanded role parameters mean? I asked. Harper didn't answer immediately. She seemed to be measuring not the question but the state I was in while asking it. Then she turned to another tab in the folder and slid out a thin addendum sheet. Participation, she said, moves you into a confidential strategic unit. Work is proprietary, contract-bound, and operationally isolated from standard departments. I scanned the headings. Non-disclosure scope, comprehensive. External employment, prohibited. Geographic mobility, required. Availability window, continuous. Psychometric monitoring, ongoing. I felt my shoulders tighten. This is full-time, I said. It is exclusive, she replied. The distinction landed hard. I read further. Travel on demand. Assignment duration unspecified. Termination penalties proportional to acquired liability value. My throat went dry again. So, I said slowly, you pay off my debt and I basically belong to Harrow. The words came out flatter than I expected. Harper shook her head once. No, she said calmly, you remain an employee. A small pause. Just not a transferable one. Something cold moved through me then, fear yes, but braided with something else. The terrible clarity of understanding exactly why they had chosen me. Not talent. Not potential. Leverage. I looked down at the contract again. Then, despite myself, I asked the question that had already decided everything. How long? Harper leaned back in her chair, hands folded neatly on her lap. The city outside the window stretched endlessly, skyscrapers catching the morning light, but I barely saw it. My attention was anchored to her, to the calm precision in every movement. 12 months, she said finally. 1 full year. You comply with the program in full, fulfill the requirements and every financial obligation you carry, medical bills, loans, back rent, credit cards, is cleared. I swallowed, trying to process it. Every debt gone, instantly, a clean slate. My heart wanted to leap, but my mind kept counting all the conditions, all the implications. And if I do? I asked quietly. Her eyes didn't flinch. Then the relief never comes, you remain liable for everything. Simple, brutal, absolute. No exceptions, no partial forgiveness. A line drawn in black and white with me squarely on one side or the other. I ran my hand over the folder again, feeling the weight of every number, every page, every detail I had tried to ignore. For the first time in months, I realized just how close I'd been to tipping over completely, financially, emotionally, mentally. And now, one signature could pull me back from the edge. I looked up at her. The offer wasn't just a contract, it was a lifeline. And somehow I knew that signing it would change everything, not just the numbers, not just the debt, but the life I thought I knew. I didn't yet understand how far that change would reach. But I also knew I had no other choice. I picked up the pen. My hand trembled slightly, though I tried to convince myself it was just fatigue. I could feel the weight of the folder beneath my fingers, every page pressing against the back of my hand, like a reminder of everything I had been running from. Harper watched silently, calm and steady, like she had been expecting this exact moment from the very beginning. I signed. The sound of the pen scratching across paper felt louder than it should have, final in a way that made the air in the room feel thicker. I folded the contract and set the pen down. The act itself was simple. Yet as I straightened in the chair, I realized the gravity of what had just happened. The old version of my life, the version defined by debt, stress, uncertainty, was over. Every unpaid bill, every late notice, every frantic call and sleepless night, they were gone, replaced by a new reality I couldn't yet see clearly. Harper slid the folder back toward me. "You have 45 minutes to gather what you need for the immediate future," she said evenly. "A car will be here at 5, everything else can be handled later." I nodded, hardly trusting the words. I stood in my apartment in Logan Square, surrounded by 3 years of accumulation. A second-hand couch, stacks of books with cracked spines, photos of my parents smiling in the sun years before illness had touched us. I grabbed only the essentials, the photo, a few clothes, my laptop. Everything else I left behind. By the time the black SUV pulled up, the city block I had known for years felt alien. As we drove downtown, cracked sidewalks gave way to sleek glass towers, corner stores to high-rises, the familiar fading through the rear window. Every turn of the wheel pushed me farther from the life I'd left and closer to a future I didn't yet understand. The car stopped in front of a building that felt nothing like anything I had lived in before. A sleek tower of glass and steel, every surface gleaming, everything precise and immaculate. I stepped out, carrying 2 small bags, and the driver already knew my name without asking. Inside, the elevator required a key card. The doors opened onto a floor that seemed designed to erase the memory of chaos. High ceilings, polished floors, walls of glass revealing the city spread out below like a model. Not a single item out of place. Not a stray sound. The kind of quiet that feels engineered. Brooke was there, waiting by the kitchen island, tablet in hand. She had swapped her work attire for something casual yet purposeful, still somehow commanding presence without effort. "Your room is the second door on the left," she said without looking up. "Closet is empty, bathroom is yours. We'll add a few personal touches, mail, photos, to make it look lived in quickly." I nodded, still absorbing the space. The room she showed me was bigger than my entire old apartment, the bed piled with more pillows than I'd ever owned. I set my bags down, standing there, feeling almost like a visitor in someone else's life. That first night we ate takeout at a long dining table. She ordered without asking my preference, and the food arrived exactly as it should, better than anything I would have picked. We talked about trivial things, work projects, the Chicago weather, minor campaign details. Professional, distant, normal, yet every so often a glance or gesture reminded me I didn't actually know this person at all. By 10, she excused herself. I lay awake in a bed bigger than my entire apartment, listening to the hum of a building designed to shut the world out. It should have felt safe, but mostly it felt strange, unfamiliar. The first binder was waiting for me in the kitchen the next morning. Tabbed, organized, detailed instructions on public behavior, how to appear at events, how to answer questions about our story, how to keep physical contact natural without drawing attention. Every page a script, every line a boundary. By the end of that morning, I realized the life I had entered wasn't just about surviving financially. It was about learning to live in someone else's carefully constructed world, while finding a place within it for myself. The first event came faster than I expected, a fundraiser downtown, black tie. The kind of evening where every smile, every gesture, and every whispered line of conversation carried weight. Brooke had prepared everything, my suit delivered days in advance, perfectly tailored. I realized she had thought of even the smallest details before I knew I'd need them. When she emerged from her room in a deep green dress, her auburn hair catching the low light, I stopped mid-motion, tying my watch. She looked unshakable, like someone who had never doubted herself, not for a second. I recovered quickly, hoping my gaze hadn't lingered too long. She caught it anyway, a flicker across her face that wasn't quite a smile, yet wasn't nothing either. "Ready?" she asked. "I think so," I said. We moved through the ballroom as a unit, our story already rehearsed in every detail. How we met, why we kept our relationship private, the narrative that would satisfy casual observers without inviting scrutiny. I held her arm lightly, leaned in when appropriate, and recited the lines we had practiced. People nodded and laughed in the right places. It felt strange, performing intimacy on cue, yet somehow it was seamless. Then Trent appeared, smooth, calculated, drink in hand, the smile already in place. He greeted me with a firm handshake, calling me buddy, and asked how a content writer from Logan Square ended up attached to the most focused woman in the building. His tone was casual, but every word was a probe. I smiled, offering a vague answer about timing and not overthinking things. He tilted his head, filing it away, and said we should meet soon, just the two of us. Brooke's eyes caught mine across the room for a fleeting second, and in that glance I understood she had been watching, calculating, anticipating. The evening carried a rhythm I hadn't expected. Measured steps, calculated gestures, a delicate dance of appearances, all under the invisible scrutiny of someone who was already planning 3 moves ahead. By the time we left, I knew the game had begun, and we were both players, though neither of us admitted it out loud yet. Trent didn't waste any time. Within days, his presence was felt everywhere. Not overt, not loud, just subtle nudges, questions, and casual observations designed to unsettle. He asked about projects, lingered in hallways, and somehow managed to get snippets of conversation from colleagues who barely knew me. One evening, I came home to the apartment to find Brooke standing by the window, arms crossed, heels off, staring at the skyline. "He's already asking questions," she said, her voice low, flat, taut, talking to people who knew me before you, looking for gaps in our story. I leaned against the counter, trying to measure my own reaction. "Then we give him nothing to find," I said. She turned to me, and for the first time there was no script. No binder, no rules to follow, just a quiet, intense moment between two people trying to read each other's intentions. She studied me as if testing a hypothesis, then nodded once and walked to her room. I stayed by the window, watching the city lights and thinking how strange it was to care about someone else's life this much. Someone who had taken a folder of my failures and used it as leverage. And yet, I did. That night the distance between us shrank in subtle ways. A shared glance in the kitchen. A quiet acknowledgement that we were not just pretending for the world. Trust began to form, not announced, not planned, just emerging naturally in the spaces between the rules we had been handed. And somewhere underneath it all, Trent's quiet scrutiny hung over us, a constant reminder that this arrangement wasn't just about money or debt. It was a game with stakes neither of us had fully measured yet. About 6 weeks after the fundraiser, the invitation arrived. A family gathering at the Harrow Estate in Connecticut. 3 days, 2 nights, the entire clan under one roof to celebrate a business merger. Brooke handed me the email over dinner, tablets sliding across the table, her expression steady but jaw tight, betraying the smallest trace of tension. "We have to go," she said simply. "Skipping it will raise questions we don't want." I read the details, shared accommodations, nightly family dinners, then I froze. "One room?" I asked, voice low. She met my eyes. "Yes, one room." "One bed," I added, the thought catching in my throat. She nodded once. "We'll manage." I put the tablet down, trying to keep my reaction neutral. But inside, every nerve was alert. Trent would be there. I could already feel him searching for cracks, ready to exploit anything he found. The drive out of the city was quiet at first. Flat roads gave way to thicker trees, longer stretches of unbroken silence. Brooke drove, a soft instrumental playlist humming in the background, neither of us speaking. My mind raced through the story we had rehearsed a dozen times, weighing every gesture, every line, every detail that could expose us. When the estate came into view, it was as if the house had grown from the landscape itself. Ivy climbing stone walls, wide steps, old oak trees framing the driveway. 4 cars already waited. Brooke cut the engine and said quietly, "Remember, comfortable, not performing." I nodded. She turned to me briefly, a fleeting smile that softened the tension. "You've been good at this," she said, "better than I expected." Inside, Margaret Hargrove greeted us. Sharp-eyed, silver-haired, warm but evaluative. She looked at me for longer than normal, then smiled. "So, you're the one she chose. I've been curious." Minutes later, Trent found us. His casual demeanor barely masked the scrutiny in his eyes. Questions that seemed innocent were loaded, probing for inconsistencies, testing our story. The dinner table was a minefield. Every word had weight, every gesture calculated. And through it all, Brooke and I moved in tandem, subtle signals and glances reinforcing the narrative we had created, determined to leave him nothing to exploit. By the time we returned to our room, the exhaustion was physical. Brooke removed her earrings, perched on the edge of the bed, and for the first time she seemed human, tired, burdened, not the untouchable CEO. "Are you okay?" I asked. "Trent is telling people things," she said quietly. "Making calls, spreading rumors. He's already trying to find holes in our story." I sat beside her, close enough to offer support, far enough to respect the professional boundaries we had maintained. "He's working with rumors," I said. "Nothing real yet." She nodded, unconvinced, and we sat in silence, realizing that trust was now more essential than the contract itself. 8 days before the board meeting, the first real strike came. Brooke's assistant forwarded an email from Trent, a scanned copy of the contract, my old debt records, and 2 still frames from the camera at the estate. He had written a short note, claiming it was a deliberate scheme to manipulate the company and deceive the board. Brooke read it at the kitchen island, expression unchanged, then set the tablet down. "He even spelled orchestrated wrong," she said, and for the first time in weeks both of us laughed, a short, sharp release of tension that had built too long. The next morning I woke early, coffee in hand, reviewing every detail in my head. Not the lines from the binder, not the rehearsed story, just the truth in order. Brooke emerged from her room, dark blazer over a white blouse, auburn hair loose around her shoulders. She looked at me and asked simply, "Are you ready?" "I am," I said. The boardroom was intimidating, top floor, glass walls, sunlight flooding the long table. Board members were already seated. Trent was at the far end, laptop open, a stack of printed pages beside him. His eyes met mine, a subtle nod acknowledging he thought he'd already won. He presented everything with painstaking precision. The contract, my debt records, the camera images, a timeline showing our marriage had seemingly sprung from nowhere. "This is not a love story," he declared. "This is a transaction. My cousin used a vulnerable employee to meet a legal condition and lied to everyone here to maintain control." The room went silent, every head turned to Brooke. She rose slowly, measured, unfazed by the accusation. "Yes," she admitted. "The marriage started as a contract, I won't deny it, but what came after, what developed afterward, was real. I brought a man into my home who had lost almost everything, and I watched him show up every day with steadiness, care, and integrity I've rarely seen. Somewhere in that process this stopped being about the company. It became about trust and about people, and that's not a scheme, that's life." The silence stretched, heavy and deliberate. Then Margaret spoke, quietly but firmly. "A planted camera in a private bedroom is not the act of someone fit to lead." She reminded the board what Brooke had built over years. Contrasted with Trent's opportunistic maneuvers. The vote, 4 minutes, Trent lost. He left silently, laptop and papers in hand. The room exhaled as one. Brooke turned to me, eyes full but composed, tears held back. "We did it," she said softly. "We did," I replied, feeling the weight of everything finally shift. 6 months later, we bought a house. Quiet street on the north side of the city, small porch, 2 old oak trees in the front yard, a kitchen that needed work but slowly transformed over weekends. Brooke kept her position at Harrow, yet for the first time in years, she was leaving the office before 8. I took a job at a smaller agency where my name was quickly recognized, my work appreciated. One evening, sitting on the porch with coffee cooling in our hands, the street quiet and still, she turned to me. "Do you ever think about the morning I called you into my office?" "Every now and then," I said. She glanced sideways, curious. "Do you regret it?" I remembered the folder, the red numbers, the pen in my hand, and the life waiting on the other side of that desk. "Not for a second. Not even close," I told her. She rested her head against my shoulder. We had started with a contract, a deadline, and a plan that was supposed to be clean, simple, and temporary. None of it stayed that way. But as the evenings settled around us, I realized the truth. The best parts of life had never come from any plan at all. They had come from a folder I almost refused to open, a question I asked aloud that made her laugh, and a year of pretending that somehow turned out to be the most honest thing I had ever experienced. And for the first time in a long while, I knew that the life I was living, unplanned, unexpected, and entirely ours, was exactly where I was meant to be. Looking back, it's hard to believe how much of my life hinged on a single folder, a stack of bills, and a choice I almost didn't make. That day in Brooke's office changed everything, not because of the contract itself, but because it forced me to step into a world I never imagined, to navigate challenges I thought were insurmountable, and to discover strength I didn't know I had. We had started with rules, rehearsed lines, and boundaries meant to protect both of us. And somewhere along the way, all of that became irrelevant. What mattered wasn't the money, the debt, or even the public image. It was trust, partnership, and the unexpected connections that grew between us, while everyone else saw only a carefully constructed facade. Now our life is quiet in ways it never was before. We still have work, responsibilities, and challenges, but they are ours to face together, without scripts or contracts guiding every move. And I've realized the most important moments often come from the unplanned, the uncertain, and the moments that scare you enough to make you act. That folder didn't just reveal my debts and failures. It opened the door to something far greater, a life I could never have planned, and a person I wouldn't trade for anything. And in the end, that's what I carry with me. The knowledge that sometimes the most honest, meaningful parts of life come from the moments you almost refuse to face.